Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with therapist and consultant Bernard Chen. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist in San Diego who owns a private practice with his wife, Priscilla. They specialize in team-based couples therapy sessions where the couple meets the both of them in the room. He helps his clients understand how family background impacts their unhealthy patterns in relationships and career, along with how to build emotional maturity and independence as young adults. It's a great interview. Enjoy. Okay, Bernard, thank you for taking a minute out for the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
Where are you located?
Yeah, I'm based in San Diego, California right now. I've been here ever since I came for college, basically.
Wow, that's a paradise down there. We took a huge road trip, not this past summer, but the summer before. Went from a wedding in Colorado to San Diego, and it was quite nice.
Wow. Yeah, no, everyone says that about San Diego, and it's very interesting. It does feel like we're kind of like on vacation all the time, fairly similar to Orange County every time I'm there. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it here.
Yeah, it's beautiful down there. Well, let's get into your life, and I want to begin this by asking, the last 3.5 years with COVID was quite a deal for all of us. I'm wondering how you survived that pandemic and how it's changed you subsequently.
Yes. Yeah. Well, first, I want to say I'm very grateful that I was able to work in person the whole time. I worked in a hospital and then in a residential program. So all the clients were staying in the building. I think that was probably one of the most helpful things for me in terms of managing my own stress levels, I think, or even just my routine. I think the biggest thing that disrupted everyone's lives was just changing the routine. When your day is no longer predictable, your brain has to work harder to adapt to things. Even things like what time you ate food changed for a lot of people because of staying at home. What time you got to have social contact with people, which we hope is predictable for you. You know, you meet your coworkers, you spend time with family, talking to them. All of that was disrupted. So I think for me, more or less, my routine didn't change, although there were some challenges. For example, I started to have trouble with leaving work actually afterwards, because that was a place where I felt like I could be out. And once I got home, things were kind of challenging for me to feel settled down. So I do remember that as being one of my challenges. So overall, yeah, I was very grateful that I could work in person the whole time. And I think in terms of how it affected me in terms of social contact, it did as well. I would say gradually my contact with people morphed into just work and clients and patients. And that was definitely not healthy for me. I had to really think about ways of, I think, being around people as much as possible. So a lot of people's communities were closed down, including church. And for my church, gradually we did shift back into in-person meetings. And so that was kind of a transition back into being around people. But overall, I would say that one of the top things that I learned is that even for myself, who is on the surface kind of more introverted, and over the years, all the different tests that I've taken show that I'm an introvert. Even for that kind of person, that environment was extremely harmful, I think, and stressful. And so I had to really learn how to have social needs. Basically, in the past, I would tell myself, I'm okay on my own. I've lived here as an adult my whole life, so I'm going to be okay just staying at home. But realizing that, I think a lot of people realize this as we sat at home by ourselves, that there are a lot of things that were kind of unfinished business for us, sitting alone with our own thoughts and realizing a lot of our shortcomings became amplified, including our relationship with ourselves. I think there was an increase in kind of self-criticism and negative self-talk during this time. And the antidote was definitely social contact, even if it was just a phone call or video call with people. I think that really kept us all going.
That was the irony of this time, was that, we realized that we could stay connected, but we weren't really being in touch and immersed in that human way,
Yeah.
and we definitely missed it. And you probably were at quite a nexus of humanity during this time as a licensed marriage and family therapist, because a lot of people, as much as maybe relationships were breaking apart, there was probably a level of relationships that were strengthening and new relationships that were happening because everybody reevaluated their lives and their existence.
Yes, I would say a process of distilling happened for a lot of people. Hopefully it happened for a lot of people. And what I mean by that is we got used to the status quo in around up to, December 2019, and that whole status quo was kind of taken away, and so we had to rebuild a lot of our foundation of our life from scratch, whether that was our job and our career. People were changing jobs all the time, the great resignation as well, leaving their jobs, leaving their career, and also changes in their relationships and their support system. Personally, I went through a breakup actually in the beginning of 2020. And now thinking back, that was actually the perfect time for that to happen for me, because that forced me to reevaluate all the people who I was surrounding myself with, the people who I was going to for support. So even though there was a kind of like empty time basically through the rest of 2020 where I had to kind of recover, and it was important for me to be by myself and be single again, I gradually learned how to kind of have better filters or better evaluations of who is really helpful in my life and not people who I kind of took for granted, and also the people who took me for granted because I was just kind of always there. And so hopefully the quality of people's connections increased through this process, or you met new quality connections. That was one thing that I was supporting a lot of clients with, is trying to understand that this is not just like a crisis where you're losing a bunch of stuff, losing relationships, losing family members, but it was also an opportunity to start again and have things be kind of better this time. That sounds kind of weird. This time will be different, but I think the first step for people was to really understand themselves first and get in touch with what they need and what kind of life they want to live, rather than just kind of passively receiving what is around you. So that kind of everyone being taken out of their regular environment, I think really helped with that. So I would call it a distilling process.
So let's get to the exact essence of what you do for a living. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day. And one of the kids looks up at you and asks you, what do you do for a living? How do you answer them?
Yeah. So being a therapist or being a counselor is basically a support person who can listen to what's going on for you from an outside perspective as a third party. So not a friend or family member, and kind of use a combination of kind of clinical knowledge, like knowledge from psychology, and then our own, partly our own experiences, although we don't make that part explicit all the time, to provide feedback and to explore. Therapists are always known for asking questions. That's, I think, one of our number one skills that we need to work on, asking the right questions to help you kind of change how you think and how you feel about what you're going through. And therapy also provides some accountability to work on these issues, where you're coming in every week or every 2 weeks with dedicated time to talk about everything that's going on, and to have someone who's kind of playing that role for you to hold on to all those thoughts and feelings and information, where you know that when you come back next time, that I'll still remember all those things. I'm keeping track with you. I think a lot of people really benefit from having that person in their life. If it's not going to be a family or friend because they're not available, or they're busy themselves, or they have boundaries about that, therapy is a place where a lot of healing can happen for that reason, because of that special role that we play, kind of as a third party or as a dedicated support person.
So take me back to where you were born and raised and how you got to this point where you wanted to be in the therapeutic arts and to help people out.
Yes. So I was born in a city in California in the LA area called Roland Heights. This was around the 90s when my parents came to the US. I actually grew up moving all the time to different countries because of my dad's job. He was working in international business. And so through those experiences, I had to work through a lot of change in my life from a young age. And it really impacted my kind of my development culturally or as an individual. Around high school, I learned that there's a terminology for this called third culture kids, which is basically people who grow up in a kind of a multicultural or like overseas kind of expat environment, and the way that impacts kind of how you see yourself. where you're receiving all these cultural influences from multiple sources and you try to synthesize or integrate those into kind of a more coherent kind of identity for yourself. For example, the question that we all wrestle through when we're growing up is where are you from? It's a very ambiguous question for us, and so everyone has to slowly work through like what are the parts of my experiences that I actually care about, that I value. I don't have to take on everything that my parents taught me or other people who I've been around, and so I started getting support for that around ninth grade when we settled in Taiwan, which is where my parents are from. And I went to a very interesting school, a K to 12 international school, where they had licensed therapists to be our school counselors, our guidance counselors. This is around pre 2010. So this was before it was cool for schools to hire counselors to be kind of on site. And I had a very good experience with that. Actually, both of the counselors who were there while I was a student, I still keep in touch with them sometimes. They know that I'm doing this now as a career myself. But I think through the process of myself getting support, understanding my own journey as an individual helped me to understand that there are a lot more people like this who are going through something and need someone to talk to who can put in the effort to understand them. This goes back to the idea about family and friends taking you for granted. Sometimes they've spent so much time around you that they just kind of assume that they understand you, but oftentimes that's not really the case. And through, I think, seeing how that way of living and moving all the time impacted my parents and their relationship helped me to understand that those generational influences that impact us. Now, as a therapist, I focus a lot on attachment-based therapy. So processing your relationship with your parents and how they raised you, how they communicated with you as a child and met your needs. That impacts so many things, not just in kind of dating and marriage, which is where the attachment kind of transfers to, but also even your friendships or even in the workplace. I think a lot of the materials and the discussions about business leadership is slowly shifting towards mental health and emotional self-awareness and relationship-based communication. So all of that is going to be informed by kind of these concepts about attachment as well. So yeah, definitely through all of my own life experiences, I started to be interested in these ideas in psychology, and I was exposed to a lot of those through kind of the own support that I was getting at the time.
So, who's been kind of a hero for you in your life?
I would say I would say definitely my mom, and she kind of raised me and my brother by herself while living in all these different places. Now, as an adult looking back, I can really see how hard she was trying and also how anxious I think she was feeling. Imagine being in your mid to late 20s, living in a different country and trying to raise two sons. We're very close in age, so we were basically um, around the same stage. And so that kind of added a lot of challenges for her, where she had to put in kind of double the effort to kind of manage and supervise both of our lives. And now looking back, I can see all the things that she learned over time that I also learned from her as well. This is not necessarily a good thing, but I remember around ninth grade, I think when I was like 13 or 14, kind of realizing that I had to start playing a role in the family myself because my dad was away all the time working. And so gradually we started to build almost like a partnership kind of or cooperative relationship um, that really helped the three of us kind of get through these times in our life. So now we have a great relationship. We're almost like friends or peers now. And I think that, seeing the way that she tried hard with limited resources and limited information, limited support, kind of built up an idea for me that kind of individual resilience matters a lot. And from there, you can connect with people and we can all support each other. So definitely, yeah, I would say my mother, someone I think about a lot. We keep in touch. We have a very good relationship even now.
So, if you can meet anybody on the planet, whether they would inspire you in your profession or overall, you would like to meet, who would you love to meet and talk to?
I haven't really thought about this before, actually, because there are a lot of this is interesting because I consume a lot of YouTube and podcasts as well. There are a lot of people who I kind of look up to, but kind of passively. And when I stop playing and I put down my phone or leave my computer, I just kind of don't think about them as much afterwards. But I would say, as an example, maybe someone like Lex Friedman. He has a very successful podcast, and he's someone who I think I would very enjoy very much, kind of talking to. In some ways, we have kind of very similar personalities, kind of very thoughtful, introspective, and he's a very great host. He asks very good questions. He's not afraid to touch on different topics with people. I think that's a big part of why he's successful, and he's also had a very interesting kind of childhood experience, um, also coming to the US from, I think, Russia, and being in this very kind of high functioning kind of school environment. He's spent time at MIT working on AI and I think robotics as well. But at the same time, you can see that he has other interests. Like he has his curiosity and his thoughtfulness extends into other areas of his life. His friendships with people. When he has guests on his show, you can really tell that he's trying to connect with them as a person and not just to kind of use that podcast setting to kind of extract information from them or just to like make the show sound good. So, hopefully one day, I can meet him. I think that would be very cool. Not necessarily to like be on his show, but even just to know him as a person, I think would be very interesting for me.
What is the motivator for you every day to get out of bed, to do your work, to help others, and to meet your goals? What is that motivation for you?
I think as a young adult, I've really focused on building independence for for myself and freedom, especially in terms of financial freedom. And that's a big reason why I went into private practice and to be self-employed, despite all of the challenges. And so I have my private practice with my wife, Priscilla. She is also licensed. And this has been part of our plan basically through our whole relationship is to work together. It's been one of the big kind of building blocks of us kind of going through our relationship and eventually getting married, which was actually exactly this time last year. We just had our 1 year anniversary earlier last week. And just through knowing her and her experiences, she did not move very much. She has lived in California her whole life, but we kind of came to the same conclusions about what we wanted for our life. And definitely from the way that she kind of experienced things with her parents and their relationship, we connected a lot in that area. And so I've always wanted to have that kind of partnership or kind of team approach to marriage where we're both building towards something. In traditional society, this would include physically, literally building the house that you are going to live in and you are going to raise your kids in. So I've really enjoyed kind of working together with her as a business partner, not just as each other's spouse, because it helps us to really focus on each other. That's one of the things that was disrupted for a lot of people during the pandemic, actually, if I could go back to that. Before, you would have this routine of leaving home, going to work, and then coming back to where you would connect and bond for your relationship or your family with your kids. But once people started staying home more, we had to really face each other. And it was not always pretty. There were certain things that people were able to kind of avoid or put on the back burner because of leaving the house to go to work. And so certain issues or questions became unavoidable. And so going into our relationship from that history of the last few years, we understood that if we're going to have a successful and fulfilling life together, we have to really like being around each other. And so we've really worked on that. And so far it's been going well. We live together now, obviously, and working together every day. The way that our conversations integrate kind of the business logistical stuff and then with just our personal interactions, emotional communication is very interesting to watch because we both understand how they're related. You may have heard the idea before that once you become self-employed, your career growth and your personal growth becomes the same thing or becomes the same path. And I really believe that for myself and for us. And so the way that we think about building our career and our business is really integrated with building our relationship and achieving certain goals like, home ownership, parenthood, and raising kids. Like that's all in the future, in store for us. And so having that future oriented thinking is really, I think, what keeps us going. And having things to look forward to is really a good goal to have, a good approach to working through these emotional issues that everyone encountered and suffered through during the pandemic.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into a much younger version of yourself, say in your, just maybe just coming out of high school, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on what you've learned so far, the wisdom you've gained. What advice would you give your younger self?
I would say this would be a very good conversation to have because I was going through so much in college, with depression and also with just coming back to the US. In the TCK world, this is called re-entry when you go back to the country that you were born in or the country that you have a passport in, and going through those culture shocks of being in the US long term when I had just been away for so long. I think I would have told myself to take things more slowly. It's okay to have future oriented thinking. That is healthy to like have goals that you're motivated towards, but it's okay to just kind of like focus more on each day that you have. I think I went through college kind of missing out on a lot of things, social connections with people, friendships, even events. I remember staying in my room for most of my 4 years of college. I would kind of leave to go to class and then come straight back. And there were days where wouldn't even go to class. I think I kind of deprived myself of a lot of quality and fulfillment in my experience. So I think that's one of the main points that I would tell myself is to go more slowly and focus more on what is actually around you. I was living so much in my own head, in my own kind of negative thoughts and feelings that I could not even see kind of the good that was around me. Even the people who were trying to be there for me. I did have friends. I did have people who were supportive of me who enjoyed being around me, but I just didn't really recognize that or didn't acknowledge that from them. I had big issues with gratitude, I think, not having gratitude and just a lot of resentment about my situation and just wishing that I could get to the next step. I wish I was done with college. And then even in grad school, I was in that mindset. I wish I was done with grad school and, trying to get to licensure. I think now I've learned that, especially now that I'm at the end of my 20s. I'm turning 30 in February, so I have a lot to a lot to reflect on, I think, in the last 10 plus years
Yeah, for
of
sure.
being a young adult. And it's very interesting that it was all through being here in San Diego. I didn't move at all after that. So I think that helped me to at least not have the change going on in my environment because I think that's easier or sometimes more convenient to focus on. People tell themselves, if I just move to a different city or a different state, then everything will change. That's not necessarily true. You have to actually make sure that it's almost like you have to be changed first before you're ready to go there and make the most of that new environment. You can't just put yourself in a new place and expect for everything to be different. So, yeah, I would say, more gratitude and also focusing more on what is actually real and what is actually good around you. I think I was kind of living in this like fantasy world of like how much better the future would be. But it was actually very miserable because each day that would pass until that nice future would happen, I was still suffering a lot.
So, Bernard, everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
That is definitely something that I've had to think through over the last, several years. And it does tie back to, what kind of conversation I would have with myself. I think for a lot of therapists and just people in general who are self-employed or who are very focused on their career, we have to think about what kind of person I am aside from the things that I can do for somebody. When we're meeting with clients, we're playing a role all day. We're kind of wearing that hat. And even in other places with family and friends, we're kind of wearing different hats for them. And I think as I come out of the COVID pandemic and starting to work on, in-person connections with people, having friendships, it's very interesting to try and build friendships and to meet people as a couple as well. That's something that we're learning right now. I have to really almost like check in with myself. Like, am I trying to perform a role right now? And it's happened before, if I go to social events, networking events, like the minute I tell someone that I'm a therapist, I can see myself going into that script where, the other person, their eyes will light up. They get excited and interested about that because there's kind of that novelty factor in knowing someone who is a therapist without actually seeing them. And I've noticed myself falling into that script of like starting to talk about work and what I do because, people, it's not on purpose, but they'll ask you about that kind of stuff. And it causes people to be curious about you. And so I'm learning not to fall back on that as like a way for people to connect with me. And at the end of the pandemic, where a lot of people are also kind of getting back in touch with their interests or things that they enjoy, and having that to lead with kind of who you are or even your personality, because obviously if you have a certain personality that is a good fit for being a therapist, that will be a strength for you, but it doesn't mean you can just kind of bring that toolbox with you to other parts of your life. So I think that's something that I'm still learning now with my view of myself and being okay with not always having to do something for somebody, and just enjoying it, enjoying the moment of being with someone and not having to always talk about something serious or important. So I think that's something that definitely is kind of influenced by work, impacted by work. So definitely still a work in progress, but not having those requirements put on myself is, I think, the main goal for me for the next, few years, especially as the business matures and I don't have to feel like I'm trying so hard. That underdog mentality only lasts you a few years, and eventually you have to shift your mindset to not feel that way about yourself. Criticism of yourself, feeling sorry, um, feeling inadequate. Those are all things that hopefully I can start to work through more and more.
Absolutely. So, Bernard, if anyone out there wants to learn more about you, hire you, anything about your world, where's the best place to go?
Sure. So we have a website. It's www.bernardpriscilla.com. It's just my wife and I, our first names strung together. And so that's where you can contact us. We're licensed in California and Florida. If you would like to meet with us online. And of course, in-person sessions are available through our website. You just have to be located in San Diego. I do also have LinkedIn. I'm still learning how to use it, trying to figure out what works for me. I am on LinkedIn as well, so feel free to connect with me there as well.
Excellent, Bernard. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for taking time out today, and send my best to San Diego.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.